Hello.
Hello. Oh, I'm excited to chat.
Oh, same. I've been following your work for a little while and stalking you. I guess that's like how every fan of people's work is. I see people do that to me all the time. Suddenly you'll like see a bunch of likes from one person, or they'll go through your stories, I guess they like my stuff. And so I've been doing that with your stuff lately. Dr. Melanie Joy over on Instagram is who she is, you guys. She is a PhD board certified holistic health specialist. And yeah, you're doing your thing out there. I've seen you making the rounds on various people's shows. And I was like, hey, girl, Living La Vida Low Carb, Jimmy Moore, we'd love to have you come on my show as well. So I'm glad you did today.
Oh, absolutely. And I love your podcasts and your posts. And, definitely I felt, the way that you present information is very relatable for people. And I think that's what people want is they
Yeah.
just want easy to digest information because there's so much information out there.
Oh my gosh. The reason I wrote this book right here was I was just a layperson looking at all the scientific gobbledygook out there and going, how are like normal people supposed to make heads or tails of what this is supposed to mean in the real world? And so I read it, or I wrote it very first person, acting as if I'm talking to someone trying to explain what keto is. And you do very much the same thing, trying to explain like nutritional health concepts and making it easy. So thank you for that compliment, by the way. I try very hard at being the everyman. Even though I can go there with the nerdy, I try to always bring it back to this is what matters to people and kind of make the practicality of it all shine.
Absolutely. Well, and making it simple, I think, is important because how else are we going to apply the information? If we just have a lot of knowledge, I think that's what I try to help my clients with is how can I help them apply the tool that's going to help take them from point A, sickness and symptoms, to point B, living a healthy, holistic life.
So what's your story? Were you sick at one point in your life and you were able to heal yourself? I've interviewed thousands of people, and that usually is the journey. Either it's them, close personal family member in the medical profession, maybe patients. What was it that got you interested in this?
Yes, absolutely. It was my own personal story. I was diagnosed with a heart condition when I was 21, and I wanted someone to get to the root cause of that. I didn't know anything about natural medicine. I just knew that I had symptoms and I wasn't getting any answers
Right.
other than this particular diagnosis. So I pretty much exhausted the medical field and was told that I would need to be put on painkillers and anti-inflammatories the rest of my life. And I truly just rejected the diagnosis. I started seeing natural doctors, which was like a foreign concept to me. And I started seeing practitioners that did muscle testing and taking supplements. I was really taught how to change my diet and my lifestyle. And, you know, after seeing so many doctors in the medical field, it took a chiropractor to first, he was the first one to ask me what my diet was. I had no idea how many hamburgers and cookies I ate on a daily basis. I literally had no idea, and how much stress that was causing to my physical body. So it was almost, in a sense, coming into like a reality of what I had been doing to my body for 20 years. And it couldn't keep up. So I worked with natural practitioners, changed my diet, changed my lifestyle, ended up reversing the heart condition. I ended up beginning to feel like I was getting my life back. The fatigue lifted. It was almost like I went from feeling like an old lady to, being able to enjoy life again.
Yeah.
And that experience absolutely changed me. I mean, I went from being a teacher and I decided I'm totally changing my career. I want to study alternative medicine. I went back to school, studied alternative medicine, and I realized that's really what I want to do is I want to work with people. And I loved teaching and I love students, but I wanted to help people through this transitional period of, you know, helping their body go
Yeah.
from feeling like it's falling apart to knowing how to trust your body and knowing how to trust that the symptoms and the signs it's giving you are actually wisdom to
Yeah.
actually direct your path. So it was that physical process. And then throughout my journey, there was this emotional process.
Right.
And this emotional process of um, connecting with my soul. And I didn't really know how to do that, but it was almost as if my physical symptoms were beginning to occur again, even though I had resolved that. And it was actually my emotions that were unresolved and unprocessed, undigested, that were causing those physical symptoms. So then I went on this whole soul healing journey and realized I have to incorporate this into my practice in order for someone to really have holistic healing and just kind of jump on that wave.
Yeah.
And Jimmy, it is the joy of my life to work with people. I'm a clinician at heart. I'm on ground zero. I hear people's problems and symptoms on a daily basis, and my job is to hold space for them to again help them trust their body and know that, okay, this is real. Yes, this is a symptom. We need to figure out if it's physical, if it's emotional, is it stress? We need to determine what is going on so that we can resolve it. And really what ends up happening is um, it requires love. It requires this person seeing themselves through the eyes of love
Right.
instead of through, there's a problem, I did something wrong, I'm wrong, really harsh criticisms and judgments of themselves,
Yeah.
and looking at it as, well, how can I show myself love today? And it's my greatest joy and honor to work
Yeah.
with people and to show them that discovery process.
And you're way ahead of the schedule of what I want to talk about. And we definitely want to hit on all that. So hold that thought right there. You traveled down the journey a little far. I was trying to stay in the early part. So in the early part, though, you said something about like after you went to mainstream medicine trying to help you with the issues you were dealing with, you're like, screw that. Like, that's not the answer. Where did that come from? Because most people acquiesce to what the doctor has to say, the whole white coat syndrome, also people of certain ages. The younger generation tends to buck the trend, but there are people that are extremely trusting of the medical system. What gave you the gumption that there has to be a better way?
So that's a really fascinating question. And it's something where I think I had been repeatedly trying to get resolution from the medical field. And so, when I grew up in Ohio and then I went to college in Florida. So it was, I had seen medical doctors in Ohio, I had seen medical doctors in Florida, and I just kept hitting, no matter which doctor I saw, whether it was a sinus doctor or a gastroenterologist or immune system or regular MD, a cardiologist, I kept getting this brick wall answer of either a diagnosis. I mean, Jimmy, I can't tell you how many times I was diagnosed with the stomach flu. How many times can you be diagnosed with a stomach flu before someone says, maybe you have a food sensitivity? Maybe there's extra stress in your life. Maybe you contracted a parasite. No one said that. I didn't get any of those answers until I went to natural medicine. So it was kind of like I had hit so many brick walls and realized the only thing I'm going to get here is a diagnosis and a medication, and
Right.
that's not going to solve my problem.
Well, and if the answer is lifelong this drug, that's your clue that there's probably more to the answer than that. I think so many people, they go on these maintenance drugs, and then how long am I going to take it? Well, you're going to have to take it for the rest of your life. You're a type of diabetic. You're going to take metformin the rest of your life, don't you know? And not give them any instruction on how they can heal that so they can come off that medication. I think every patient knows inherently they don't need to be on medication for life. Everyone trusts that that's the way it's to go because the doctor would not harm me, would he?
That's the thing that scared me the most when they told me that I would be on painkillers and anti-inflammatories when I knew when I took those medications, they were negatively affecting my body, they were affecting my mind and my emotions, and that they weren't really solving the problem, and that I essentially would be on this train where, okay, if I had symptoms, take the drugs and medications, or stay on them constantly. And it was almost like there's no way that I can do this to my system for the rest of my life.
And how many people do that, Melanie? They gladly take drugs. And then when they go back to the doctor, I'm not really feeling great. Oh, you're just getting older. That's the natural part of the aging process. Like I've done a lot of soul searching on this because so much of the medical speak is almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Give people drugs that make them age and make them feel aged. And then as they age, you blame it on the aging, and the consumer, the patient goes, yeah, it makes sense to me.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, it's a sickening system. And I'm glad there's people like you out there that are making the connection between mind, body, soul. And I've been doing a lot of that in my own work of like making the connection to trauma specifically for me and how it has impacted me physically in my life. Because people think of emotion and they just kind of compartmentalize it of emotional health is here, physical health is here, and not realizing there's kind of this cross-section symbiosis where all hell can break loose. If your physical is out of whack, it's going to affect your emotional. If your emotional is out of whack, it's going to have to affect your physical. Why don't you think that's more prevalently known?
Yeah, it's, unfortunately with our medical system, they have so compartmentalized, where if you have a mental, if they think it's mental or emotional, they send you to maybe a counselor or a psychiatrist. But maybe if that person isn't trauma informed, or again, they're just going to prescribe a medication to help, what they would term regulate, but really be suppressing the emotion to just kind of numb the person out. So it's kind of like their answer is always kind of numbing you. And the real answer when it comes to the emotions is really simply to acknowledge our emotions and what's going on there. Because when we can acknowledge our emotions, it kind of brings us out of a state of denial,
Right.
and we can accept and absorb and integrate. And and when we can kind of look at something in a sense that, okay, this doesn't mean that I'm bad. This doesn't mean that I'm wrong. This doesn't mean that I'm worthless. It's just that there's a part of me that wants to be seen, heard, and validated. And so the way that I kind of describe it to my clients is that, if you have a house and if every room in the house is filled to the brim with trash, well, that trash can be toxins from food. That trash can be, your toxin bucket is full. Let's say maybe you ate a lot of really difficult to digest foods, or the pesticides in our environment, or maybe we had amalgam fillings and so there's heavy metals. And so we've got this physical inflammation and there's like trash bags filling up the rooms. And let's say we also went through traumas and we weren't given the tools on how to process our emotions. Now we've got physical trash bags of sadness, hurt, pain, loneliness, maybe even good feelings too, of maybe we're afraid to feel pleasure, happiness, joy, love. And so we've got these little spaces in the home of our house that gets filled and filled and filled. And before long, we're very inflexible. Our nervous system becomes inflexible. And even if, let's say we were to do like a yoga session, or a little bit of stress would happen in our life, and all of a sudden our body's like, whoa, we're having to deal with all this stuff that's packed around us. It gets very overwhelming. So this is why I always suggest someone to work on their physical body first. Focus on your diet, focus on movement, focus on better quality sleep. Work with someone who will personalize nutrition to you and help you to discover a therapy like acupuncture, reflexology, acupressure, craniosacral, rolfing, something where you can get a handle on the physical health
Yes.
Because physically, if you're feeling like, okay, I can do this, it's much easier to handle the emotions. Otherwise, the emotions are just too heavy.
Yes. I'll tell you what, I tried cupping for the first time. What was it? Last year? No, maybe year before last. And the first session I ever had, I cried.
Yeah.
Spontaneously came out of me, and I'm like, why am I so emotional? I was like really emotional. He's like, yeah, because we tapped into something back there physically that was an emotional problem. And I'm like, say what? Like what magic did you just do?
Wow. That's
Yeah,
amazing. And I've actually, a lot of people say that with acupuncture too, that
yes.
they just spontaneously have this release. And I think that's the intelligence of our body, is our body really knows what it wants and what it needs. And it only has so many ways to tell us. So, as an example, depending on someone's body type, I kind of like to break it down into there's a book called Releasing Emotional Patterns by Dr. Carolyn Mine, and she breaks down how every person has their unique body type. So, what that means is that I may have a different emotional response to something than someone else. So, as an example, one of the emotional body types is physical mental. So, this person may have issues more with their nervous system, their brain, dizziness, headaches. Whereas if someone is more physical emotional, they may have more structural issues. They
Right.
may feel emotions more in arthritis or related to their liver. So, again, with the emotions, just like with the physical, it has to be personalized to your unique system. So,
Yeah.
as an example, the body only has so many ways it can tell you there's a problem. So, let's say someone has this chronic recurring symptom of dizziness. Let's say they focused on hydration, they are taking minerals, electrolytes, they're eating regularly, they're getting protein regularly, and yet they're still having this symptom of dizziness. Well, we can check and see, okay, is there a potential emotional component? Is your, so your body is trying to bring back into alignment your body's movement. So, was there something that happened where your body is saying, I want to take back my movement? Or let's just go with the skin. Maybe someone's skin is itching and it's like, okay, well, maybe it's not candida, maybe it's not mold, maybe it's not a food reaction. Maybe your body is telling you that it's itching to get out of a certain circumstance. And
Mm.
once you go through that questioning of your body, like, okay, body, I'm going to acknowledge that you are telling me that I'm not comfortable with a situation. And a lot of times the body almost goes through this down regulation where it's like, okay, I can take a deep breath. They just acknowledge me. Almost like if you've ever been around a child who is thirsty and you finally figured out that what they needed was a cup of water and you give them a cup of water and all of a sudden they're like just like happy and they're like chilling and they're like awesome, like I got my sip of water. It's like that's how our emotional body is too. It just wants us to notice what's going on and notice, first of all, our body is so intelligent. It knows if we're around someone that our body doesn't think is safe, our alarm system is going to go off. Or if we are involved in a business relationship or a personal relationship and our body is stressed out and does not like that situation, it's going to tell us. I can't tell you how many times people have told me they can't even go into a church building anymore because it's so stressful for their body. It's like, take a break, listen to your body, and let's work on your nervous system to see, how we can bring some balance and acknowledge, what's going on within the person's system. So to me, it's really just about listening, acknowledging, and I say that with such simplicity because it's actually a very it's a process that requires sensitivity.
Yes. And when you start paying attention to those physical, and I would even say some of the mental and kind of thoughts that pop in your head, kind of signs that your body's trying to tell you that something is awry, it opens a whole new world for you. I think so many people, they feel those things in their body, they think those thoughts, and they just think, ah, no, it's kind of a throwaway. They're not really paying attention. Maybe now, you guys, you're watching, you're listening to this on my podcast. Maybe now, when those things pop up, okay, why do I have that kind of tenseness in my shoulder neck area? What is that? Oh, and whereas before you just be like, well, I just need a massage, just need something to work that out, rather than why is that there?
Yeah, if someone's, repeatedly seeing a chiropractor or repeatedly seeing a massage therapist almost chronically, I'm going to assume there is some sort of emotion, a sensation. Sometimes, I mean, with emotions really are physical sensations.
Yeah.
So a lot of times when we can explore, okay, does that sensation have a shape? Does it have a color? Does it have a texture? And as we begin to unravel that physical aspect of it, sometimes they're like, actually, it's the feeling of loneliness, or it's giving off this feeling that, I'm giving way too much, or I'm overly having the responsibility in this situation. And they'll say, I feel that every time I'm like overdoing it. So it's kind of, in a sense, I'm when I work with someone, I'm helping them to build a healthier relationship, because a lot of times when someone has those physical symptoms, it's like, well, what is going on now? And I guess I just have arthritis. I guess my body's just falling apart. And so it's rebuilding that relationship of, okay, my body is smart, my body is telling me something,
Yes.
what's going on here. So I mean, it's really just acknowledging that sensation.
So I just had a physical sensation today from playing a song. So for some reason, Tears for Fears, Sowing the Seeds of Love came on, and I heard it, and like in my body, I was transported back to what was happening in my life when that song was popular on the radio. And I'm going, why do I feel that way? And it wasn't the thing. And I'm going, oh, I was still like in my trauma and healing, but it was like my body remembered, and that triggered the memory of that emotional state of what I felt like. And it manifested as a physical feeling of heaviness and stress. And I'm going, whoa, like it was just, and people have these triggers all the time with smells and sounds, and even like seeing a familiar face, like all of those things can rush back things like that into your body.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because especially when there's trauma, it's almost as if we have these little parts of us as layers, and they're kind of frozen in time. And something may trigger that little piece of us that's frozen in time. And if we have the tools and the resources, we can integrate and process that little piece that just came to the surface. If we don't have the tools, it can become a reaction. It can become an over the top emotional reaction. And so having the tools, I mean, this is something I do in somatic experiencing, which is, it's a technique created by Dr. Peter Levine. And whenever we have triggers, he would recommend, titrating and kind of going back and forth within your system to the heaviness, to something that feels more lighter. So as an example, I may help one of my clients to find an area of their system that feels strong, or that feels neutral, or that feels positive. And then that makes our ability to process the heaviness a little bit easier, because we have something stronger to go back and forth on. So sometimes if we're dealing with something heavy, my client may say, yeah, it's like, I don't want to be here any longer. It's like, okay, let's notice the positive neutral state. Or sometimes, Jimmy, that body space is very uncomfortable for people to be in. So before we even get to the body space, we may just focus on orientation and the room that we're in. And let's find something that's grounding and positive that assists us in being comfortable. Because sometimes just creating that resource of comfortability and letting your body know this is in support of you, that it changes the dynamic. It's not like we're just running around with a hammer and nails and we're trying to like build this structure of, this, it's not like we're trying to like, recreate a whole new person. We're trying to build safety. We're trying to build comfort. We're trying to build peace. And as we do that, it almost gives the space for those bigger, uncomfortable sensations.
So we know a lot about nutrition and its impact on chronic disease and your health over the long term, but I wonder how much of this emotional piece is the missing piece in so much of, especially mainstream medicine. It's totally ignored. Practitioners like yourself, functional medicine doctors, chiropractors. And in fact, I remember going to the chiropractor for the first time in my early 20s, and he had this chart on the wall that showed the various vertebra, and it's like it had little like bullet points, and then all the little things, and it was like, okay, this is your anxiety, depression, and this is like propensity for diabetes and heart disease, and it just was all these little things. They've known for a while kind of how you tap into those parts of your body. I just wonder, is this going to become more mainstream where people acknowledge, okay, my emotional state and the state of how I feel on the inside has a lot to do with my current physical state?
I think in certain settings it is becoming more acceptable. However, it is the harder road because when we incorporate emotions and the soul and the nervous system, it becomes this process where that person is maturing and where they begin to see themselves from their higher self. They come out of that ego-based response because the medical field, because they make everything very physical, and because they don't give us the tools, it's almost like you've got some people walking around, with a broken limb and they don't even know it because it's their emotion.
Right.
So as far as the nutrition component is important, but it's not everything. Even I can even tell you in my own health, I mean, how many supplements and functional medicine doctors that I worked with, but it got to a point where I realized I have to take care of my emotions, where it's almost as if, okay, these supplements are good, but what am I missing? And I can tell you there are a lot of good functional medicine testing, a lot of good functional medicine supplements, but how long, like, we can only stay on that road so many times, so many rounds. How many goes can we make before we realize, okay, I'm going to have to sit with some uncomfortable emotions and sit with something uncomfortable as it comes up before I take a turmeric ginger capsule? Or, what situation do I need to digest so that I don't need to take the peppermint soft gel every single day, kind of thing. So they're so connected,
Yeah.
but we need that physical side because that physical side gives us confidence. And absolutely, the nutrient component and the nutrition component is important because that helps with our nervous system flexibility. I mean, there are many times where my client will need B vitamins and that helps, their mood fluctuations, or there's a hormone imbalance and we need to, focus on detox and liver support. So there is a time and a season for the nutritional component, for herbs, but it's kind of like where we get to the point where, okay, there's actually a hurt that needs to be processed
Yeah.
so that I can move on.
And in the process of processing that hurt that you've had. I personally, CBD has been helpful. Ashwagandha. I've got various little things that I do that have kind of given me that calm while I'm calming the storm clouds in my head of things going on. Why do you think so many people are reticent to going there? Is it because when you go to the emotional side, it brings up such pain in an acute way that people are like, oh, don't want to have to feel that again. Whereas if they feel it one time, maybe one more time, it's done, it's healed, and then they can physically heal and physically move on. I'm thinking of very specific people in my life that had ugly things happen to them when they were younger, and here they are in their very old years falling apart and not knowing why.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. It does sometimes go back to those childhood wounds. And I feel like unless someone is really working with someone to help them embody those deeper things, because more often than not we need a someone to co-regulate with us and help us to feel safe in those moments, because when those emotions are big and loud, and it can be upsetting, and no one wants to go through that process alone, because it almost makes you feel more alone, more depressed, more fatigue. In those moments when the emotions are really heavy, it can be hard to get out of bed. So when you have someone that can co-regulate with you and let you know, okay, we're going to take this step by step, we're going to focus on creating a safe place for you to be able to process these bigger emotions. And actually, Jimmy, I think yes, the childhood component is a component that can be healed, but also it's about rebuilding the relationship with ourself, that maybe we haven't been living our purpose, or maybe we have had a lack of boundaries. And when you get to a point in alternative medicine, it's almost as if, okay, have I been living for everyone else's life? Where does my value system play into effect here? And it becomes less about really helping other people and more about what are the issues in my life that I need to take care of.
Oh,
And
but
yeah,
that takes such strength on an individual basis. And you're talking to a dude that's been doing it for a few years now, um, trying to work up the gumption that I need to go inward to be a better outward. Um, but when you do that healing work, oh my God, Melanie, like if I'd known where I am now, I could be here 10 years ago. Dang it, I would have done it 20 years ago.
I know. Me too.
But better late than never. There really is no too late. Like people, well, I'm too old to, yeah, screw that, guys. Change. Like you've got the power. I got the power. Do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's a process of developing our internal courage. And it's a process of standing up for ourselves and not waiting for someone else, but that we are going to stand up for ourselves and begin to allow and acknowledge that person on the inside of us to feel wanted, to feel loved, to feel validated, to feel seen. And that's a different language. That is a different language. That language does not come from the medical field. That is something that, someone could visit doctors their whole life. They're not going to hear that language. That is a new, you know, natural medicine is about connecting with seasons, connecting with nature, connecting with our authentic self. It's about noticing how our system responds when we feel the wind blowing, when we see a waterfall, when we're sitting and we're noticing a river flowing, and the changes that happen within our system. That's trauma healing. That's creating a safe place. And that sounds so simple, but that's not in our medical paradigm. And how healing is it? I remember on my healing journey, I read this book. It was by a doctor from actually Cleveland, where I was from, and he wrote about these studies that he did on earthing. And I thought, this is so ridiculous. How is this even going to help me? Like, how is this going to help my symptoms? But I I plunged in, I just dove in, and I'm like, I'm gonna sit outside for a certain amount of time every single day. I'm gonna just lay in the grass and see what that does. And it changed my physiology.
Guys, it's as simple as go barefoot in your front or backyard where there's grass, if you've got a place that's got grass, or go to a local park, put shoes off, put your feet on the ground. And it sounds so weird. Yeah, I actually interviewed a guy 13 years ago, 13, 14 years ago. It was one of the first episodes I ever did. And he talked about earthing and grounding. And I'm going, that sounds woo woo, dude. But like the more I started thinking about it, the more I did it, you feel the physical effects, you feel the emotional effects. Like you're like, well, what's that doing? It's doing a lot. Like give it a go.
Yeah, and for me, it actually got to a point where I could recognize in my system, I need to get outside. I need to get in nature. I there it almost helps you get more connected to what your body really needs,
Yeah.
whether it's a community, a person to hang out with. It's almost like I could get in my system and realize I actually need to get into the woods and go on a walk. And it's, in that process of alternative medicine and natural medicine, that that has been around. That has been the norm of our human existence. I
Right.
mean, that has been now, when I'm in trainings with nutritionists and, they're writing studies about forest bathing.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I'm glad we have the studies, but it's like we have all of human history
Yeah.
that shows us that this is healthy for them.
Right.
And yes, the studies will show that the trees, give off these chemicals that help our bodies relax, and that's great. But do we really need to really necessarily have that from a study perspective, or do we just go out in nature and feel it for ourselves?
Hey, at some point they did study gravity. Okay, when you like drop something, it's going to fall to the ground. Like it's we joke about those things. So I guess it gives researchers something to do, but when it's self-evident that you would think, duh. But hey,
Exactly.
I want to hit on something about when you change that I've noticed, especially over the past year. Oh my gosh, the past year. Everything that's happened the past year. So when you start changing, people are going to notice. And you're going to put out this vibe that will make people very uncomfortable. And so when people get uncomfortable, they will flee. So I lost, Melanie, half my friends last year.
Yeah.
Just up, gone, hadn't heard from them, don't know where they are, and they haven't stayed in contact. But the good news is my new self attracted new people that were much better, much more my people, much more aligned with who I am as a guy, as a human being. And I have such a richer relationship with the people in my life now than I had with any of those people who fled. So just be prepared for that. If you make these changes, if you put in the effort to change mentally, which will manifest physically, it's gonna lose you some parts of your life that maybe need to be purged.
Absolutely. Yeah. When you level up and you begin to be your authentic self, that can kind of scare people. They're maybe not comfortable with making those changes in their life. And so they kind of withdraw. And so it doesn't necessarily, we make those changes, we feel better, and then it freaks people out because we have more authenticity, more confidence, and they were used to us as a person that maybe had a lack of boundaries or a lower self-esteem, and all of a sudden, we've acknowledged things within ourselves, and there's growth that takes place. And I think, yes, your authentic tribe, the people that you want to run life with, they start coming, and the other people, it's like they were there for a season and now, they're not there. And I think that's actually a mourning process that is okay to go through. It's a growth process, and mourning in the sense, not that it's bad, but that, okay, mourning that process of your life,
Yeah.
and then, being able to have because after mourning, there's joy, having that joy of the new friendships and the new connections.
Can I tell you, the morning was strange for me because in my mind, I saw what I lost in that moment of the morning and wasn't looking at what I gained by them no longer being there. Like, I realized how much of my life was superficial, how much of my life I thought was normal, but it wasn't at all. And it wasn't thriving. And I've really kind of come to this conclusion that if someone is not feeding into me in some way in my life that's in my life, then they're sucking out of me. And I got to get rid of the people that suck.
Yes. Oh my goodness. And this kind of brings me to that topic of boundaries. Is is there an energy vampire that is draining me, that is just constantly taking? There's never this mutual connection, this mutual giving, where someone is just almost constantly at your boundary. And us having the self-worth and the confidence to realize, why is someone constantly hitting up on our boundaries? So, boundaries are important because it gives us the ability to say yes and to say no. And I know in my own life, as a child, I kind of gravitated, or almost like my system, I just went straight into people pleasing. And I have had to take so much time to break from the people pleasing, because it was almost like, as a child, it was, just help, serve, do whatever you can, be the it person. And that gets exhausting when you're around people that are constantly taking from you. So developing boundaries, not only in my personal life, but also in my professional life,
Yeah.
means that I get to say who comes close. I get to say who I'm going to keep a little bit farther. And I'm allowed to say no. And developing that skill of, you know what, I can't, or that's not going to work for me, or having the strength and the fortitude to even say no is huge for a people pleaser. It does get a little bit easier because you end up realizing, I'm not responsible for that other person's emotions,
Yes.
and they're responsible for them and their world, and I can only be responsible for me. And if I allow this person to continue to take little pieces of me and feed off of me, I'm exhausted at the end of the day.
And knowing thyself is so important. And yeah, I've learned a lot of that lesson as well. In fact, with the boundaries, sometimes you're going to completely cut people out that you would never think you would. And that happened for me. My abuser, my dad, I had to completely cut out of my life last year because he didn't acknowledge and he hasn't come to this realization of what he did to me. In fact, he's done just the opposite. He's denying it happened. And I'm like, okay, for my emotional state, for my stability in this, I have to set the boundary of, you can't be in my life anymore. And that's a tough decision. Like, there's people, oh, you can't do that to family. If they're sucking out of me to the point that I might be in a detrimental state in my own life, you bet you sweet bippy they're going to get cut out. Not to cut people out of your life, but that's one example of a boundary that you can set for yourself.
And I'd really like to commend you for making that boundary, because sometimes it is a parent, sometimes it's a sibling, sometimes it could be a person that we think is safe. And I truly want to commend you, because it's difficult to have to make that choice. But I think there's so much growth that comes when we put ourselves first.
And I've felt that growth, especially over the past couple of years in doing some of this work. Um, and for people to kind of get involved in this and to get started with this, people often ask me, what started you kind of wanting to work on yourself? I'm like, I think you get tired of feeling bad. You get tired of wondering why things are the way they are. And it always feels like kind of malaise, even though maybe generally in your life things are going ish well, you kind of go, there's just something not right. If you've got that uneasiness about you, seek out help from people like Dr. Melanie and anyone else that can kind of dive deeper into that, because I just don't think enough of us are recognizing, like we were talking about earlier in the discussion, some of these signs that your body's screaming at you something is wrong.
It's true. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and there's so many practitioners. I mean, there's so much help available. It's almost amazing to me to think how many good practitioners there are, and they're in your area. They might not advertise. You may have to ask around, but there are good practitioners that can
What
help.
what are they looking for specifically? A title, or is there an organization that like groups all you guys on one page, or what?
There are some. I always like to tell my clients to response testing, because that is just an easy way to start with the physical.
Can you say that?
Um,
I'm cut out. That you tell your clients what?
Nutrition response testing.
Okay.
There, I also really like practitioners that do EMDR,
Yes.
that do somatic experiencing. So, there may not be one practitioner, start with an acupuncturist.
Right.
They're fantastic at helping you get on herbs and helping you reduce your stress. I mean, there's a doorway for everybody in alternative medicine. So I think just starting with a practitioner in natural medicine or the field of alternative medicine is probably the best way to start.
I want to shift gears a little bit, because you recently posted something on your stories that summarily got removed from Instagram. And again, I'm going to show people your Instagram page so they can see who you are. It disappeared. But you were on Instagram and you posted something on your stories at your Dr. Melanie Joy page. Can you tell that story, and what was it about that it got removed?
Yeah, I was looking at my feed and it looked different. And so I went to my Facebook page and I noticed that a post I had made, and it was a post regarding the memory of Brandy Vaughn. And she was an outspoken um, woman who really outspoke against the pharmaceutical industry.
Right.
So she was a Merck employee, and then she had difficulty with having her son and not wanting him to be vaccinated. And she really became this power to be reckoned with. I mean, they tried to silence her so many different ways. She ended up passing away. I think they're still determining what all is going on with that. I'm very suspicious about it. I think they're still doing the testing to determine. It's very suspicious. And I did a post in her memory and it was deleted. Now, I have a lot of different posts that could potentially go against the pharmaceutical industry. So it's really odd to me that that is the one post that was taken down. And it almost seems like, I don't know if they're trying to delete her work, her image, her name, her memory. It's almost like, she is someone who was very outspoken against, you know, that industry. And the pharmaceutical industry, they pay, these media companies. I mean, they're the sponsor to these media companies. So they can't say anything that goes against the pharmaceutical industry.
Right.
So, it's almost like we're dealing with big pharma central. If you go against them, we're just going to silence you. So it's very upsetting. And then I asked the people on my page what they thought, and their responses, I mean, they were pretty much on point of what they thought was going on. And I just think it's sad that it was a woman who was fighting for truth. She was fighting for medical freedom for her son, for others, for herself. And that is something that needs to be removed. Then it's like, well, what else has been removed?
Oh, we know what else has been removed. Any mention of the V word, as I call it, for 9-1 Diebach, as I call it.
Yeah.
Figure it out, people. Go backwards. There it is.
Yeah.
And yeah, every time I do it, you have to speak in code. And you're right. Like the cozy relationship between big tech and big pharma. I mean, God, I mean, it's one of those things that unless you're just completely asleep and you're not paying attention, it's obviously there because they are censoring a lot of information. We saw it a lot last year with 9-1 Diebach and all the everything that group of doctors that had the little press conference, and it went viral and then it went away about hydroxychloroquine and zinc and all the other things for dealing with the virus. And it's like, since when was information harmful? Because I hear that a lot too. Well, the information is misinformation, so that could be harmful. And I'm thinking, no, information is informing to give people information about making good decisions about their health and what they want to do. We live in a very dystopian world right now.
Absolutely. And I've never had any fears about my practice or anything. I've been in practice for 10 years and never had a problem. And in the spring, it was right around, I think, April, I had a post on my Facebook page that got a lot of traction. It was about masks. And 1 month later, I had a cease and desist from the Department of Health regarding
Whoa.
my practice. I ended up having to get a lawyer, and the lawyer wrote up everything beautifully. I mean, all my credentials, the laws, how it worked, and we never heard from them. He tried to contact them, I want to say 4 times. He submitted everything. We never heard from them. Now, the Department of Health was busy with their contact tracing crap, and they were busy, putting out all this fake news information all over social media and talking with the government, trying to tell governors what to do. So I get it, they were busy, but it just goes to show that, it's almost like they just want to fear you into being silent.
Yeah. Yeah. They bullied you into submission and they thought you'd turn over. But quite frankly, Melanie, most people would.
Yeah.
And when you push back against the oligarchy, so to speak, coming at you, I think that's what's going to have to happen. I think it's just beginning. And quite frankly, I've been at this game a long time, about 15 years, just as an educated patient trying to help other patients. That's my gig here. I'm not a practitioner or anything, but even in my world, I've seen it happening like slowly over the years, more and more and more kind of pushing back at us. And here's the thing too, I'm on a little bit of a rant now. Um, we have had government officials for longest time telling us saturated fat is going to clog your arteries. We've been told all kinds of nutritional health lies over the years. Why do we suddenly believe the science as it relates to what they're telling us with this when they've never been truthful about the science with that?
Exactly. So all of a sudden, we're just supposed to believe them. Like everything they say is just truthful. And didn't we learn our lesson in the early 90s when everything was low fat and it didn't work for people? People were starving, they ate more sugar. And, even looking when Crisco was really introduced and when butter was kind of taken off the table, and how much more heart disease we saw from that.
Yes.
When, throughout human history, people have been eating red meat, animal foods. And when you study Native Americans, most of their diet was animal based. Absolutely, there was plants there. They ate berries. Or when we go to South America, they eat tubers. There's absolutely a connection between plants and animals, but the pharmaceutical industry's villainization of animal foods, of butter, of cholesterol, of saturated fat, it's it's almost as if the lie has been going on for so long. We're having to spend so much time reversing that lie to put out the truth. It's almost as if, okay, well, they've got the studies out there that are not well done. A lot of them are observational. They don't really produce the the way that the title is worded, it's very much so like this, red meat will give you cancer. But when you study, it's like, okay, well, those people were also smoking,
Right.
they didn't eat vegetables, they didn't eat fruit. It's like, okay. And then we look at, Dr. Price and what he studied when he traveled around the globe. He thought surely there is vegan societies, vegetarian cultures that have healthy teeth, that have healthy immune systems. He went and studied people in the Loschental Valley in Switzerland that their diet mostly was sourdough, rye bread, cheese, milk, animal products, vegetables as well, and they were healthy immune systems. They didn't get the same disease of that day, tuberculosis. So that village, it was almost as if their immune system was protected, and they were eating. Their diet had saturated fat in it.
Right.
Their diet had animal products in it. And he thought it was almost like he had to prove himself wrong, and then even studies he studied in cultures, he studied in Africa, and there were more vegetable based cultures. They certainly had insects. There was some seafood, some animal products, but this would be the more, vegetable based cultures. He found out that their teeth weren't as strong, that their immune systems weren't as strong. And so I think absolutely there is a place for plants and animals in our diet, and whichever way that combination works for us in the season of our life. I mean, we can take a 20-year-old, they can probably handle way more carbs than a 40-year-old. So it's all about the season of our life and what our body needs, and not shaming someone else for finding something that works for them.
Yeah, the whole vilification of, well, you're not doing my diet, so therefore you're an enemy. And I'm thinking, that makes no sense at all. I don't give a crap how somebody else is.
Right.
At the end of the day, you do you, I'll do me, and let's support each other along the journey. Getting back to the psychological, emotional, that's where a lot of that genesis of that happens as well. It's like making up rules that everybody has to think the same way, everybody has to eat the same way. It doesn't work that way.
Right. It absolutely doesn't. And that is, in working with people of all ages, different genders, different nationalities, different races, different ethnicities, everyone is going to need something different. It's I could never show up in my practice and say, yep, everyone needs a vegan diet. I mean, or everyone needs a carnivore. It's just not going to work. But there are times when the diet can be used as a tool. So it's fascinating to me when someone really like tries to blanket statement one diet for everybody. I mean, I look at me and my husband, we both need a totally different diet. There are times he needs more carbs, or I need more carbs, or times I need to intermittent fast, or times he does, but it's never like the same thing.
Right.
And so it's even two people in one household. I mean, imagine how we're trying to blanket statement, what's going to work for everyone in the country. This is where personalization, and I think that's why it gets so confusing, because someone can write up something very convincing with scientific evidence, but it doesn't work for them. And so this is where I think people can get confused, is that we just have to apply it personally to ourselves.
Which is why I always tell people, don't listen to what I say. Listen to what I say, process it, and then apply what you think applies to you. But at the end of the day, you right there are your own guru for who you are.
Yes.
Guys, Dr. Melanie Joy over on Instagram. Go check her out, you guys. Do you have a website or anything? I see you've got a link tree here.
Yes, drmelaniejoy.com.
She makes it easy, guys. drmelaniejoy.com. Go check her out. Do you do consulting over the internet?
Yep, virtual and in office.
Great, great. So, guys, go check her out. Melanie, you're amazing. Like, I knew when I connected with you online that when we got on this call, when we did this interview today, it was going to be great, and you did not disappoint. So, thank you.
Yes, it was awesome. You're welcome.
All right.